Welcome back to Giants Latest. Hit that subscribe button for all things Giants. We are 1 week away from the NFL draft. I cannot wait. And with that being said, Giants general manager Joe Schoen had his pre-draft presser that he has every year. Let's talk about some of the highlights from it because there were a couple things that I thought were interesting. So let's obviously start with the quarterback situation because the Giants obviously are in a position where they could go Shedeur Sanders at 3. And when Joe Schoen was asked about it, he said that they are in a good spot. He feels good about the quarterback room right now, and he is not going to force the quarterback pick. He said in regards to the quarterback, he really thinks that leadership is an important trait because you're the face of the franchise. So being able to have the leadership capabilities is something that's important to them. They've talked about this when they talked about signing Russell Wilson, that he's a perfect example of that. He has a lot of leadership experience. When he was asked how important it is to take a quarterback at some point in the draft, Shane said it's not mandatory because of the free agent signings and that he likes the quarterback room the way it's at right now. Name the 3 quarterbacks. And said that, they're not going to force it if they don't feel like the value is there. And to me, I think what's most important about this, and in my opinion, I think it really leads to the fact that they're not taking Shedeur Sanders at 3, is, like he said, the value. The value is one of the most important things when it comes to weighing players in the draft. And we saw this last year, right? That they could have picked JJ McCarthy. There was all this talk before the draft. The Giants love JJ McCarthy. They had him in on the Sunday of Easter weekend, and he came in and they had all these meetings and they love him. They're never going to pass him up. What do? Pick Malik Neighbors. We find out later on Hard Knocks that the way that they had these players valued was different. And that, yes, they did like JJ McCarthy, but not at 6. And to me, the fact that Joe Schoen has repeatedly talked about the value of the position and where they draft a player means that they are not taking Shedeur Sanders at 3. That's where I'm at. I'm sticking with that. I do think that they really like Shedeur, and I don't think that it's anything against him. I think it's simply we have Abdul Carter and we have Travis Hunter rated higher than Shedeur Sanders, and if one of those guys is on the board, that's who we're taking just because the value is not there for that specific quarterback at 3. Now, last year was a different scenario because we knew that they loved Jaden Daniels and they loved Drake May and they tried to trade up to get one of those guys. They have tried to trade up to get Cam Ward. So Cam Ward's value, they have rated that higher than Shedeur Sanders. So I think it's really important that when you listen to these things that Joe Schoen talks about and you kind of put 2 and 2 together, that's what I took away from it, is that they're not taking Sanders at 3. But let me know if you guys feel differently, because I think that, when we talk about the quarterbacks always go higher than where they should, right? Last year, Bo Nix was ranked to go 29. I think Daniel Jones was ranked to go 34. And look, Daniel Jones is an outlier, okay? Because no one was picking him at 6 except for Dave Gettleman, who is not smart. But Joe Schoen would have never picked DJ at 6. And, they didn't pick Bo Nix at 6 last year when they could have. Bo Nix was picked by the Broncos, I think at 12 or 13, maybe even 15, because they knew that he was a great fit for him, and whether other people had him ranked at 29 or not, they knew that he was the right move for them. And I think that the Giants are in a position, because they already have quarterbacks, that they feel like they can postpone the quarterback to a later round, and that's what I think that they will end up doing. We obviously have talked a lot about quarterbacks, but I want to talk briefly about the 5th-year option because, as we talked about, the Giants have until May 1st to decide. Joe Schoen said that they have not made up their decision about whether or not they're going to sign the 5th-year option for Thibodeau or Neal. I think it's safe to say that they probably will take Thibodeau's at around $15 million a year. Neal's at almost $17 million a year. I'll be absolutely shocked if they end up doing it, but they have to make a decision by May 1st, like I said. So Shane said that they will make a decision after the draft. So that will be coming up soon. So let's talk about a couple other quotes from Joe that I thought were interesting. So he, of course, was asked about Travis Hunter and spoke very highly of him, just like Brian Daboll did. I think that if it's between Carter and Hunter at 2, or 3, excuse me, I could definitely see the Giants taking Hunter over Carter. I think they love both of them. I do, but the way that Daboll and Shane have both gone out of their way to be very kind and specific in the way that they talk about Hunter is unlike what I've heard from them in the past. Like, they talk this way about guys like Drake May and Jaden Daniels, and I just feel like they really love the two of them. So when he's talking about Travis Hunter, he said he's a unique individual. He's motivated to play both ways, and that he wouldn't doubt the kid when asked about whether or not he sees him more of a corner or a wide receiver, or if he should play both. And he said that, he doesn't doubt him in the sense that he thinks he's capable of playing both positions in the NFL. Now, in regards to that, Shane also said that he likes their secondary right now. And I think that's really interesting because when he was asked about positions that are pretty deep in the class, he mentioned cornerback, defensive tackle, obviously, and a couple others. But I think it's interesting that he mentioned corner because there's been a lot of talk about, him saying, the secondary is in a good place, bringing in Adebo and bringing in Holland, that maybe they wouldn't go after a corner. But I think there are a lot of good corners in this draft, and I think that there are definitely still some question marks around Tay Banks that I wouldn't be surprised if they end up drafting a corner. And the fact that he mentioned it's one of the deeper classes, but he also likes the secondary, I think he's trying to kind of play on both sides of the fence, so he feels like he's not giving anything away. He also was asked if they got any calls about moving up or moving down, and he said, we'll be open to all options in terms of trading both ways, but they have received some calls at 3. He also said, we like our options and we like who will be there. So in my opinion, I think the Giants are going to stay put at 3. I think they're probably going to stay put at 34. I think the fact that they have a bunch of picks between the 3rd and the 4th round is where we might see some movement from them based on what I'm hearing. I think at 34, they're going to go best player available. And I think in that round 3, round 4 range is where we're going to see them target some sort of quarterback, whether it's Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, or Kyle McCord, who they brought in for a top 30 visit. They also brought in quarterback Tyler Shuck, who also had a private workout and a top 30 visit. Keep this in mind because we're going to talk about this next week, but when the Giants have drafted a player, most if not all of the players that they have drafted, they have had a top 30 visit for. So we'll get more in depth about that, but that's something to definitely keep in mind. If the guys that they have brought in the building, they are more likely to draft, obviously, if the positional value works out and if those players are there when they're about to draft or close to draft. So we could see some movement when it comes to things like that. What else? He was also asked about if him and Dable are not on exactly the same page when it comes to drafting a player, that him as the GM makes the final decision. And I know that in the past there's been some conversations about Joe Judge was the one who made the Kadarius Toney pick. It's Dave Gettleman. Can't we all tell that? There's been so many rumors and things that went around. Well, Ben McAdoo loved Pat Mahomes, and someone else loved another quarterback. I forget who it was, but they didn't end up drafting them because the GM makes the final decision. And Dave Gettleman made some really awful decisions. And we could say the same for Joe Schoen. And this is something that I think is really interesting because he also talked about the fact that him and Dable have worked together for so long. They have a really good relationship and they have a good plan and process of how we go about things. We always hear about their process. But what I think is interesting is the fact that he is the one that makes the final decision. And I think that if he is not sold on the value of Shedeur Sanders at 3, he doesn't care what Brian Dable says. He's not drafting him. And what I also think is most interesting about this, and then we'll wrap it up here, is I think that there was a lot of issues with the quarterback room last year from Dable's perspective, because like I just said, ultimately Joe Schoen makes the final decision, and we saw it. We saw the cracks between Dable and Jones. We saw it with him and Drew Lock. The fact that they skipped over Drew Lock and went to Tommy DeVito. We see these bizarre situations that Dable has done the last couple of years when he goes to have to put in a backup quarterback, whether because Jones was released or because he was injured. The way he goes about things is just very bizarre to me, and just I think it's really driven home that point that Joe Schoen makes the final decision and Dable has to live with it. And I am not sure that that's the best way to do things if you're the coach, but it is what it is. I don't think Dable's going to be able to stop that in this year. And like I said, if the value's not there, Joe is going who he's going after regardless of what Dable says. So the draft is 1 week away. It is going to be very interesting. I can't wait to see what happens. Subscribe for everything Giants.